Hi, welcome to Medyascope. On Friday, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani won a landslide victory in the country's presidential election. Today, with Mr. Amir Mahdavi, an AM candidate at Harvard University Center for Middle East Studies, we will discuss the victory of Hassan Rouhani and, in general, the Iranian election. Welcome, Mr. Mahdavi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. So I want to start with the victory of Mr. Rouhani. Was this a surprise for you, or were you expecting this result?
Actually, I am not surprised by the result of the election. I predict that he will win this election since 1 year ago. But in the recent weeks, 3 or 4 weeks before the election, prior to election, the competition got tight, and there were some days that we predict and we thought that maybe he will lose by very low margin, like 49 to 51, something like that. But in the last one week, he could trigger his campaign and boosted his campaign very well, and his rhetoric spread around the nationwide, and even the Iranians outside the country got motivated to participate in election. Actually, in the last 10 weeks, my interpretation is that he could bring 4 to 5 million voters who are usually reluctant to participate in election in the Islamic Republic, and all of them voted in favor of him.
So what were the most important, biggest determinants that led to Mr. Rouhani's victory? What did he say to this electorate who wasn't very willing to participate in the election, but how did he convince them to go to the ballot box and vote for him?
Actually, he could depict the picture of we and the others in the last 2 weeks of his campaign. He did that very well, and he used the personality and the background and the resume of his competitor very well. And he could depict this picture that side, the other side is other, and this side is we. We means that all of the Iranian people, regardless to their particular political orientation, who are in favor of development, engagement with the world, and religious tolerance. We, and the others are like militarized political party who are in favor of tension with the rest of the world, continuing nuclear program, and they welcome sanctions and tension with the rest of the world, and they are supporting they're supporting religious restriction and moral restriction in social affairs and cultural affairs. I think he was quite successful in drawing this picture and making this division in society.
I see. And there was another election on Friday in Iran, local elections, and it wasn't discussed as much as the presidential election, but I guess it's really important for domestic politics. And we saw that the pro-Rouhani Hope campaign had a big victory in local elections too. When we consider these two victories, both at the presidential election and local elections, what does these tell us about the aspirations of the Iranian electorate and also the future direction of the Iranian politics?
Yes, actually, I think the candidates in the local election, the city councils, the reformist candidate and reformist release enjoyed the presidential election campaign as well. So by depiction of this picture of we and the others, and put Mr. Raisi, the competitor of President Rouhani, as the icon and as the head of that the militarized faction, which I described before, as the possible very dark possibility for the future of Iranians, they go to ballot box and voted to the to the reformist candidates in all of the, especially centers of the provinces. So I can see that as a byproduct of presidential election, and now the reformist and the moderates broad faction take over all of the elected body in the Islamic Republic government, city councils, executive branch, and parliament.
And we have seen Mr. Rouhani speaking very boldly in his campaign. As you said, he has raised important criticisms against the military establishment or the political establishment of Iran. So I was wondering if, do you expect or do you read his boldness in this election campaign as a sign for him turning to more reformist politics? Do you think that also, as an additional question, do you think that military establishment will let him to turn to more reformist policies?
Actually, to be honest, his approval rate in terms of economic policy was not so high. Actually, was low, was pretty low. According to the polls from both factions, his approval rate in economic affairs was 7 or 6 out of 20. Mm-hmm. So, what I can interpret from his late policy in his campaign trail was that 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the election, he figured out that his win is not secured yet, and the economical promise of Mr. Raisi, who promised to offer cash to very poor levels and promised to create 5 or 6 million jobs in 4 years, is going to tempt very poor people, and as you can see in the electoral results, Raisi was pretty successful to gain the vote of the this economic desperate people. So I think this new phase of Rouhani's rhetoric campaign and his bold criticism of the involvement of Revolutionary Guard in the Iranian politics and Iranian economy was a result of his escape, and he was afraid of his win in the election. So he employed this kind of rhetoric to bring that 4 or 5 million that I mentioned before. Fresh voters, new voters. I cannot name that as a swing voters, mm-hmm. because they are reluctant to voting at all. So by implying that rhetoric, he could bring them to the ballot box.
Do you think he will have space to? Do you see what he said during the campaign as mere rhetoric to convince these voters who are reluctant to vote, or do you think he will have space to actually realize what he has promised during the campaign?
I think he's going to reduce his speed after taking the office for the second time, and he is going to do his best to pursuing his promises through cooperation with the supreme leader. Actually, in his very first press conference after the election, he pointed to the Revolutionary Guard and Basij members that I love you, I like to work with you, and try to make a division between the body of those organizations and their commanders. So I think he will have a tougher time rather than in comparison to the first term, but he's not going to be as bold as the campaign trail. And another issue here is that after death of the former president Hashemi Rafsanjani, Rouhani had no choice but becoming the leader of the followers of reformist and moderate factions. So I don't think he had another choice to employ another language in his campaign trail. And this campaign was a very, very big move for President Rouhani. In the last election, he was interpreted as a proxy of former President Hashemi Rafsanjani. But with the lack of former President Rafsanjani, now he is the leader and he is responsible to the followers and the people who support this faction. So he has to address their concerns directly by himself.
So that's something that I wanted to touch upon. You recently published a Middle East brief co-authored with Nagmek Sohrabi. I guess she's your professor. And you mentioned three major issues that shape the pre-election political atmosphere in Iran. And these are namely the effect of, as you just mentioned, the effect of Rafsanjani's death on the reformist centrist alliance, the question of succession of the supreme leader, and also, and you name as the defining issue of the election, the unemployment crisis and mobilization of the populist vote. And I guess these three issues, they do not only shape the pre-election political atmosphere, but they will continue to be debated in the Iranian politics. So can we just briefly go over these three main issues? You just mentioned Rafsanjani's death. Do you think Rouhani can fill the gap Rafsanjani has just emptied?
Actually, he had a good start, and he has already begun this process in his campaign, and he has to continue that. I don't see any other choice for him in his prospect. He has to maintain the relationship with the supreme leader. He has to actually he has to enjoy and keep his trust, and he has to leading the reformist and moderate alliance. So it's a very, very hard task for him. And this is the thing that only Hashemi Rafsanjani was the only single person in the history of Islamic Republic that who practiced this kind of experience. But we have to wait and see if he's going to succeed in this new mission. And another factor that we raised in that the Washington Post op-ed was the matter of succession of supreme leader, which its shadow is covered the whole Iranian political spectrum. I think one of the reasons that Rouhani could gain almost 24 million popular votes, 6 million more than his first term, was that the people understood and people believed that if Ebrahim Raisi get elected in this election, he is going to be the next supreme leader, and and if they support Rouhani would have a chance, even a slight chance, to be the next supreme leader. So somehow this election became as a referendum or primary election for the next supreme leader, and that was another reason to motivate the followers of both sides. And the third factor, as you mentioned, was the unemployment and the readiness of the Iranian political atmosphere for populist slogans and populist agendas. And we saw this trend in the campaign trail of the Tehran Mayor Ghalibaf and Ebrahim Raisi during the campaign trail, that they promised to give offer cash to the very poor people, offer cash to the housewives and raising the unemployment insurance and finding job for placing 5 million people in proper jobs, and this kind of rhetoric that was implied before by former President Ahmadinejad. And I think when we compare the results of this election to the previous elections, the presidential election in the Islamic Republic, we can conclude that Raisi could gain 5 to 7 million of voters who are not principalists in the Iranian, according to Iranian political language, and who are not necessary serious followers and loyal people to the supreme leader, but they are, we can call them as desperate people who vote for their economic benefits. So yes, the 15.5 million vote of Ebrahim Raisi is a good indication of that. This populist attitude in the Iranian politics is so alive.
Mm-hmm. And I want to turn now to another point that you raised in the op-ed. You said that the political establishment in Iran, Khamenei and his allies, do not see. They think that they marginalize threats posed by figures such as previous Presidents Khatami and Ahmadinejad. Can you expand a bit more on this point? Why do you think Ahmadinejad and Khatami were posing a threat to the political establishment, but Rouhani is not seen as a threat, and can he turn into another threat?
Actually, it's hard to predict the future because Ahmadinejad came to power as the most loyal and the closest people to the supreme leader, and very iconically kissed the hand of supreme leader in the inauguration ceremony. So and we saw at the end the division between him and the supreme leader, and 4 years later disqualification of him for running in the presidential election. So it's hard to predict the future. The politics and the popular votes shape the politicians, and politicians shape the politics as well. So we cannot predict this kind of dialectic between people and their constituency. I think so. The Rouhani's constituency and Rouhani's supporters will push him towards more conflict with the supreme leader as well. Mm-hmm. But historically, Rouhani is a person who is more trusted in comparison to Khatami and Ahmadinejad. The supreme leader's problem with Khatami is the 2009 election, mm-hmm. and his continuous support of the two candidates of that election who are in house arrest right now. And Ahmadinejad disobeyed the command of the public command of the supreme leader, who prevent him to, and who actually suggested that Ahmadinejad shouldn't run for this election, but he went and registered his name. We don't see any indication of such activities from President Rouhani, and we have to keep in mind that President Rouhani, right before his election, was the representative of the supreme leader in the Supreme National Security Council for almost 2 decades, and they have a long-term relation. I know he is not the last member of the closest circle of the supreme leader, but I think he is an individual who can, who at least does his best to manage his relation with the leader and his constituency as well. So we have to wait and see how he could manage this balance.
Okay. So lastly, I want to turn to the speech that American President Donald Trump gave in Saudi Arabia this weekend. You know very well that in his speech, Trump vilified Iran as the source of chaos and terrorism in the region. And it was also interpreted by many commentators as Trump's attempt to create a Sunni bloc in the region against Iran's increasing influence. So I wonder how this speech was perceived in Iran? And how do you think, although we're not really sure about what will be Trump's foreign policy still, how do you think Iranian foreign policy will shape in the near future as a response to the trajectory Trump detailed in his speech?
Actually, there's 2 points to address to this question. First of all, is that the Iranian foreign affairs people, they perceive this what happened in Riyadh and Tel Aviv in recent days. Some of that as the indication of course, re-engagement between the U.S. and the GCC and Israel, but most of that as a requirement of a big economic deal and big sale of the from U.S. I don't remember the number, but that was over $100 billion deal between the Saudi Arabia and the United States. So it's acceptable that this kind of rhetoric used when you want to sell this huge amount of American products to one country. So they don't take that as the last word of the American foreign policy. And as you saw, even during this trip, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said that I am going to begin direct connection and direct talking with the Iranian Foreign Affairs Minister. So this is the one thing. But another thing is that by the U.S. support of GCC country against Iran's activity in the region, I think we are going to see another second term of President Khatami in terms of Iranian foreign relation. And when President Khatami, the reformist President Khatami, was in office in Tehran, and President George Bush in White House, in that term, Iran had its best economic relationship with Europe. And President Khatami visited Paris, Madrid, and many other West European capitals. So I think what President Trump is doing is the best gift to the European trade partners of Iran. And I can see the trend of and the wave of the economic cooperation and the trade partnership and even direct foreign investment in Iran is going to raise in European side rather than the US.
And how do you think this attitude of Trump will affect the relationship between Russia and Iran? Do you expect Iran to get even more closer with Russia?
Yes, I think so. Yes, I can assume that Iran will get closer to Russia, but again, they are not scared from President Trump's rhetoric as much as his statements means. So I think we can separate the two issue of what indicates by President Trump in his negotiation and visit with the Israelis and Saudis, and what is the real American foreign policy right now. And the U.S. is quite alone in that sense right now. And after the nuclear deal, the Western European powers are not going to cooperate with the U.S. in these new alliances of the Arabs against terrorism. So I don't expect a major shift in the Iranian foreign policy because of the new statements by the United States President.
Mr. Mahdavi, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you in our show.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. You too. Thanks.
So today our guest was Amir Mahdavi, and with Mr. Mahdavi, We discussed the Hassan Rouhani's victory and also the future direction of Iranian domestic and foreign politics. Thank you for watching us.